All right, it's that time of year again. We're getting hyped. It's football season, and it's time now for our annual UCF Football Roundtable. I have assembled some of the best to cover and talk about UCF for this podcast once again this year. By the way, this is our fifth one. I cannot believe that time has flown by that much. We actually did a sixth one because in the COVID year we did one because we were dying to have something to talk about in the month of April. So anyway, I digress, and we are underway with the program. So let me introduce our roundtable cast. We will start first from the Sons of UCF. Here is Adam Eaton. Hello, Adam.
Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate you having me on again this year. It's always football time when I get to see your smiling faces in these little Zoom boxes. Can't wait for football to get kicked off. Can't wait to talk to y'all tonight.
Yeah, got the Brady box, the Brady Bunch box going on here. So up next from UCFsports.com, and who I like to call the godfather of covering UCF in the digital age, we welcome Brandon Helwig. Hello, Brandon.
Well, thank you very much for having me, Jeff. I feel like we've done these forever. I'm trying to remember how long it was. So you say it's 5 years. So I guess that's how long it's been. It's always an honor to be on with this panel.
Yeah, appreciate that. And from the Black and Gold Banneret, we say hello to Eric Lopez.
Pleasure to talk to UCF football. I'm just glad football's here. That means if we're getting together, that means football has arrived.
Yes, that's always a great sign of that. And from the Orlando Sentinel, we welcome back once again Jason Beede. Before he goes full tilt as the beat writer for the Orlando Magic, we drag Jason in one last time to give us his thoughts on the upcoming season. Jason, good to have you here.
Yeah, I just couldn't say no to a fifth or sixth time. I mean, I just had to keep coming back. So I'm happy to be on one more time.
Yes, I think you're fully vested at 5, so that's so you're in for the full plan. So it's all good there. All right, so I'm going to roll out for our panel a few questions. We'll bat that around a little bit and give you a good preview of what we think the football season is going to look like for the Knights this year. So we will start with our first topic, and that is to describe your overall impression as UCF enters a new era as a Big 12 member. Adam, you're first.
Well, a lot of pressure going first here. I mean, look, my impression is obviously a ton of excitement for everybody. I think this is something that's been decades in the making. So to be on the precipice now of starting on this new journey, I think is a lot of excitement. I think if you're a fan, this is what you've been waiting for, right? You've always talked about we got to play at the big boy level, and now we're at the Power 5, although I'm not sure what that means anymore because conferences are imploding by the day. But I think if you're a fan, you're really excited about where this is. If you're UCF, this is your time to capitalize. This is your time to sort of kind of put your money where your mouth is. We've said for a long time, we belong at this level, we belong on this stage, and now we have that opportunity. So yeah, I'm curious to see how not just teams do overall, but how does the entire athletic department, how's the entire school adapt to now being part of this conference? Are there going to be changes made to a lot of different things infrastructurally? I know we're here to talk about, the gridiron and the 100-yard football field, but I think there's a lot of things UCF, has the opportunity to do in the next couple of years if they really want to make their stand with the Big 12. And lastly, I think you got to be optimistic, right? I mean, this feels like a team that's got some depth. You look at the roster, you feel like this is a year right here where they've got a lot of talent. They got some depth. They've got some pieces. Can they do that, usual UCF thing and make a run in their first year in a conference? I think there's optimism there. I do want to squad a little bit. This is a tougher league, but I think there's optimism that maybe we can compete on the field. So I think this is a nice, exciting time to be a UCF Knight fan, a UCF Knight player. But I still think there's a lot of work ahead, and I'd love to see how UCF capitalizes on this opportunity.
Brandon.
Yeah. This is, I've been trying to kind of think about, if there's a comparable season, in terms of anticipation. And obviously this probably takes the cake. 2007 is the one that comes to mind when UCF opened up the on-campus stadium. Just all off season. It was just, what's it going to be like to attend a game on campus? What's the stadium going to be like? What's the vibe going to be? You knew it was opening up with Texas. That's the only thing I can kind of really compare this to. I think it's going to be one of those things when that first game gets here. I know UCF goes on the road for the opener at Kansas State, the Big 12, and we're moving that first home game, Baylor the following week when that one's here. I just kind of curious, what that's going to feel like. I mean, just kind of pinch yourself, because anyone who's followed UCF for any length of time, knows that this was always the goal. He always wanted to be perceived of playing, big time college football, whatever that highest level would be. And even though UCF was winning, obviously been tremendously successful with conference championships and Conference USA, American Athletic Conference, there was always that rub like, oh no, but you're non-BCS or you're Group of Five, you're not playing big boy football, and the annoyances of, the undefeated run in 17 and 18 and just kind of how UCF success was being dismissed because they weren't, perceived to be playing at that level. So the fact that, you look at ESPN.com today and there's a, Big 12 preview and UCF, or a Power 5 team, there's just the level of coverage and the national attention that you get in that league is just something that, I'm still not, it doesn't even still feel totally real to me. And I don't think it will be until that first game is here.
Eric.
Well, it's kind of full circle. I mean, it's amazing. I mean, I met Brandon 22 years ago. I think this upcoming September, Brandon's going to be 22 years since we met at Death Valley in Clemson on the field in the pregame when UCF as an independent was trying to slow down Heisman candidate Woody Dantzler and Clemson with Bowden as the head coach. One of the Bowdens, Terry Bowden. It was Tommy Bowden was the head coach. Terry was at Auburn at the time. And it's funny, I mean, that was an independent era when UCF was just trying to find, remember September would always be these marquee games every week on the road. There was that one year where they go to Georgia Tech and go to Georgia and host Purdue. And we're kind of seeing that now in the Big 12, but from the standpoint in conference, like, wow, you're going to go to this place. It's like a new carpet. And I think there's excitement from the fans. I think there's intrigue, not just in football, but all sports. I mean, I can tell you volleyball has sold out the most season tickets it's ever has. Basketball's selling ticket. Football, I think it's sold out, 3 games already at home, if I'm not mistaken, or at least close to it, and they might sell out more. So just the intrigue, the excitement, the newness of it is exciting. I think this is the kind of the moment, like Brandon mentioned, it's kind of a lot of UCF people internally have been shooting for, and now they've arrived here. And I think it's intriguing to see finally, too, after this kind of little debate over the last 6 years with some of the national media and UCF. Does UCF, can they hang with the big teams and all that? We'll get some answers starting this year.
By the way, Eric, I was at that Clemson game, too.
Really?
You were talking about. Yeah, that was one of the, and I went to Georgia Tech
right?
in Georgia. Yeah.
Okay.
And UCF hung in that game for quite a while.
Yeah.
Wasn't the difference the fake field goal and wasn't
Yes.
Jeff Scott the holder?
Yes.
That executed that play, and that was
Correct.
the difference of the game.
It was a much lower scoring game than people thought. We thought it'd be a shootout, but it was 21, I think 13. UCF actually with Gene Chizik, defensive coordinator, they did a good job there defensively. They just, but you're right. The Clemson had to go to a bag of tricks to pull it out.
Yep.
Jason, I feel left out. You and I weren't there. Although now, as I said that out loud, I'm wondering if you were born by the time that game was played.
I was born, but I was not that
thank
old.
God.
Nor do I remember that. And from the perspective of being a young person, Brandon mentioned the most anticipated season. I would agree with that. And I think even though I wasn't around, I was in middle school or even underneath middle school, maybe elementary school, 2007. I grew up in Central Florida, so I didn't remember any of that when the stadium was built and whatnot. But I remember, the anticipation going into 2018. Maybe it wasn't as hyped as it could have been if Scott Frost had stayed and everything was, the way it was in 17 going into 18. But still, nonetheless, you were coming off an undefeated season with a legitimate dark horse candidate, Mackenzie Milton. That was a highly, highly anticipated season. And there was I think Brandon is right where it feels kind of like 2007 where, you don't really know what's going to happen. But in terms of anticipation of, what happens on the field, it feels really similar in that sense. Like you're just ready to get football started. And we've talked about the Big 12 so much ever since the invite was received, and then they finalized the entrance dates, and now they're July 1 came, and the non-conference games are here first, but certainly the fact that we're now going to be playing Big 12 football is really exciting, and it's kind of like, I think what Brandon mentioned before, you can go on to ESPN.com and look at the Big 12 standings and read the Big 12 previews and the Power 5 previews. And it almost feels unreal. Like UCF has been pushing for this for so long. You see these logos next to each other and they're that's the new normal, and that's a good new normal. I mean, it's exciting new normal. I think I was talking with Trey Storko a couple of weeks ago, and he said, this is the first time where if a UCF player is on a watch list, they have a legitimate chance at winning, right? I mean, obviously you have special players that could be semifinalists or even finalists, or it would take a really special player, and it still would at this stage. But it just feels like with the Big 12 tag, the Power 5 tag, everything under the sun is elevated to another level that we've never seen before at UCF. So obviously it's exciting, and I think it's something that's been in the works for so long, and it's exciting to see it finally come together.
Yeah, and I just kind of look at this, having seen UCF football since the beginning, and where they have come from where they started in very, very humble beginnings, and the continual rise and graduation. And, Eric talked about all those money games UCF used to play, and they were within whiskers of capturing many of those contests. And you're just thinking and seeing the potential, this can be something really, really big. And to see that come to fruition, and I'm kind of like you, as I see the Big 12 logo, and it still feels a little surreal to me. It's like, this is now it's real, and it's quite exciting to look forward to the road we have going into this season. Second topic: new offensive coordinator Darren Henshaw, former UCF quarterback, takes over the play calling from head coach Gus Malzahn. What impact do you think that will have? Jason, we'll take you first this time.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I think Darren Henshaw is a coach that absolutely loves UCF. He's a coach I haven't, in the time I've been around UCF, I don't think I've talked with a coach like him, in the sense of you can tell he's passionate. I mean, all these coaches always say the right thing. They want to win. They want to score a lot of points and do good things in the football field, obviously. But you can there's like a different sense of passion with Darren, and that's for obvious reasons. His alma mater is where he played, and he's really proud of that, and he's really proud of the opportunity that he has, and you can tell the passion whenever he talked to us. Just really passionate about success is important to him. I mean, obviously winning is important to this entire program, but it really feels personal for Darren Henshaw. I think when you talk about what that means for the field, and what that means for the season, I think it's going to be interesting. I mean, Gus Malzahn has handed off play calling before. He's taken it back before. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but it's going to be interesting to see if there's not success offensively, what that means down the stretch of the season. Obviously, I wish the best for Coach Henshaw and what he can do. But at the same time, it's going to be interesting to see how Gus Malzahn handles not calling plays. I mean, right when he was introduced to UCF, he was going to call plays until the end of his career. And obviously, he's not retiring right now. So it's not like he lied at the time, but I think the reality of college football has changed so much with NIL and transfer portal, all yada, yada, yada. But with Henshaw calling the plays, and I think for the first time, really, you're going to have, John Rice told me, hopefully he can stay healthy as long as it seems as though they're making it really clear to him that they don't want him taking as many hits this year, which will be important. I think the word of the spring was vertical. We kept hearing how they're going to stretch the field vertically, and that's going to be exciting to see again. We saw that under Josh Heupel a lot, obviously. It went away a little bit under Gus Malzahn. And, I was talking to Javon Baker and Kobe Hudson, up in preseason and media day. I think Kobe told me that, we got to make plays down the field. And that's something you're going to see in Henshaw's offense. So I'm excited to see how that works and what he can implement here.
Eric?
I wrote for Black and Gold Banneret a column about Darren Henshaw and the impact. And it's kind of fitting in a way that he's here at this time because he was the quarterback in the 90s for Mike Kruzak, who was the offensive coordinator under legendary head coach Gene McDowell, which I know Jeff, Brandon knows, Adam knows. Clearly, we've established that Jason doesn't because he's the youngest of the group here, clearly. He's Johnny. But I think he's great. I had a really great talk with Darren at Media Day. And the thing that really I enjoyed was him talking about preparing that quarterback room. And not only that, but making sure John Rice Plumlee makes correct reads and not force the issue. but also have everybody in the room open. Like he says, Timmy McClain's going to have a game plan ready in case he's got to go in that game. Same thing for, the rest of the guys in the quarterback. And I think that's the thing he's going to bring. I think he's an upgrade over last year's group. I felt last year from an outside, granted, that the quarterback room was a mess. It was all over the place. You're talking about, well, who's the guy? You have the drama between Mikey Keene and JRP. Then you have the situation, well, are we redshirting this guy and we're shirting that guy? And even Darren brought it up to me last year. UCF found out they needed 3 quarterbacks because John went down. So you have to have every quarterback ready. And I feel like Darren has will have everybody prepared in that quarterback room to perform when they're called upon. How good they are, we will find out this year. But I expect a much more prepared quarterback room. And I think Darren's been a welcome addition. And he's very honest, very in-depth. Brandon knows this. Jason even knows that is in-depth. He'll go in-depth with you and talk about what they're working on and things like that. So, and the fact that I think John Rice can relate to him, I think he's a huge impact. I'm excited to see him on board here and help the offense.
Brandon.
Yeah, I pretty much concur with both Jason and Eric. First of all, to Jason's point, Gus, the offense has always been his baby. And when he got to UCF, he said, I'm never giving up play calling again, because in those situations at Auburn when he did, it really wasn't his choice. There was external pressure, boosters or whatnot, that wanted him to hang it up, and he wasn't really happy about that. So, but as he says, college football is different. There's been a lot of changes. There's been more changes in the last couple of years than probably the previous 20 when you look at transfer portal and NIL. And so he does have increased responsibilities on those fronts. And that's kind of that was his rationale for, I guess, handing over the reins to Darren Hinshaw. But yeah, I am curious to see how that dynamic plays out. Is Gus completely hands off? I kind of doubt that he will be completely hands off. Yeah, but how much influence will he have? Will he micromanage? A lot of that stuff we may never know, but I'll just be curious to see. And I'm just curious to see it. Period, because we don't see anything. Okay, we talk to players, what's the offense looking like? Oh, we're going to push and Darren's, to his credit, he's probably been my favorite coach, at least in this Gus Malzahn era, in terms of doing, interviews with, because I feel like he's very candid. He's honest. I don't feel like he's BSing you in any way. And if anyone's ever seen his press conferences, I think you would agree with that you're getting it straight up. He's not filtering anything. Gus Malzahn tends to be vague and talks in coach speak, and Hypo is the same way. Most coaches are like that. So I appreciate the candor that we get from Darren, but I'm just anxious to see it for myself, because they're talking about getting the ball down the field and all this stuff, and we know where John Rice struggled. I know we're going to talk more about John Rice in a moment, but he kind of struggled with some of that. UCF hasn't really been much of a deep ball threat since Dylan Gabriel left. So I just want to see it for myself, and pretty much if the hype matches, if the on-field results match the hype, is what I'm trying to say. But yeah, I think everyone's rooting for Darren Hinshaw. Like Jason said, this means something. This means a little bit more. Every coach, everywhere they're at, they want to do well and all this stuff. But the fact that it's Darren's alma mater, the fact that he's back, he left UCF more than 20 years ago, always thinking he'd come back one day in some capacity, and it just didn't work out. And, we'll see. This is obviously Gus Malzahn is a great coach for UCF right now, but you never know. A few years, Gus retires, who knows? Hired away. Who knows? We don't even know. It's college football coaching profession is incredibly volatile. Maybe he's a future UCF head coach, or at least a UCF future head coach candidate. So, he obviously wants to do as well as he can for his alma mater. And, I think we're all going to be rooting for him.
Brandon, you also broke something interesting. So Auburn boosters having influence. Who knew?
Yeah.
Adam, take it away.
I think, one of the things that I heard, so I got to talk to now current Tennessee Volunteers offensive analyst Mackenzie Milton at the golf tournament recently. And one thing he said to me is
name dropper.
Thank you.
Look at me, Louie.
It makes a big deal who your coach is, and having a quarterback coach that played quarterback is a really big deal. Mackenzie stressed that when he and I spoke about that. And I think that's interesting because you think about John Rice Plumlee and how this offense goes, with all due respect to Chip Lindsey, I don't know that he was, that quarterback whisperer if he had some of that acumen that Darren Hinshaw's had having played the position. So I'm curious to see how much of that sort of DNA from Darren's quarterback background then filters its way through the offense, particularly the quarterbacks. And I agree with Brandon. I just want to see what we're going to see. Because all we've heard all camp long is we're vertical, we're faster, we're going to go down the field, we're going to take shots. That sounds good. Like, I'm all in. Like, where do I sign up? Is there a petition I can sign today? I'm in for that. But we've never seen any evidence of that. I actually tried to do this really boring exercise where I went through all of Hinshaw's previous stops as OC, Cincinnati, Kentucky, UAB, and seeing if there's any sort of common thread there. And to be fair, his offenses were kind of up and down. And I don't know that he ever really had one style, right? You think about an offensive coordinator, and usually he is bringing a style with him. It's up tempo, it's run and shoot, it's spread option. I don't think any of us on the screen here can give you a 2-word descriptor of Darren Hinshaw's offense other than multiple, right? Which basically means everything but nothing, but you'll figure it out. So I'm really curious what that looks like. If I can play the contrarian card for a second, I'm really glad that there's a UCF guy now coaching a UCF team. I think that's certainly a big thing. But you wonder, when this offensive coordinator spot came open, Gus Malzahn probably had his pick of a few different candidates, right? There's all rumors out there. We've all heard the names and the people who may or may not have interviewed. He had his pick of a few candidates, some candidates who had some chops, some credentials on the offensive side of the football, some names that really would have raised eyebrows. And he went off the board with Darren Hinshaw. And it kind of makes you wonder, why is that? Is it because it may be easier to allow Gus to sort of put guardrails around a newer, maybe quote unquote unexperienced offensive coordinator than a bigger personality, somebody who's bringing a lot more gravitas to the role? Again, just a conspiracy theory. I just wonder how much of the guardrails Gus has around Darren Hinshaw, and how much of this offense really is his, or how much is this Gus kind of saying, hey, you can have the offense, but it runs through me and I make the final call. I don't know that he could have done that with any or every other offensive coordinator out there. But I feel like he could probably do that with Darren Hinshaw.
Well, it's a fit, right? Like, that's what you're saying. Sure. Is it's a fit. And remember, Darren was with Gus in the 2021 as an analyst. So how much did that play a role? That there is some familiarity. I have breaking news for everybody. Coaches are control freaks. I know that's a shocker to you, Adam. They like to be involved in a lot of different stuff. You're not just going to bring somebody in, just, unless you're comfortable with it, that you can, have a relationship with, and whatever that is. And, you guys have all brought up the example. We don't know what this offense, although I feel like the whole vertical deep pass, isn't that like a cliche that what is every offensive coordinator going to say in an opening press conference? Hey, we're going to just, dump it down for check down for 5 yards. I feel like that gets overplayed. We only make a big deal of that when we lose games. But again, I think that we cannot underestimate, and Brandon and Jason can disagree with me on this. I feel like the quarterback room is healthier, cleaner, more organized this year. It doesn't feel chaotic like it did last year. And I think Darren is a big part of that. I think everybody's on the same page. I know JRP is the easy decision to be the guy, but I don't get a sense of any negative in the air like last year, where I'm talking during the season, you're trying to figure out who's playing quarterback, who's redshirting. I feel it's more organized this year, and everybody's more on the same page.
Yeah. And interestingly enough, I think about, I've been calling for an OC to call the place since like year 2 of Josh Heupel, because, I just kind of felt like that the play caller and the head coach is a very, very difficult job in college football. And I think there's only a handful of guys that can do it, especially now that there are all these other extenuating things going on. So let's move on to John Rice Plumlee.
Well, Brandon, I think Brandon had a thought there too.
Oh, did you? I'm sorry. Go ahead, Brandon.
We're talking more about John Rice in a minute, but when you talk about the quarterback room kind of being less controversy, or however you want to say it, that everyone's role is defined. I think that's a very positive thing. Last year, that wasn't the case, when there was a fractured locker room, when half the team thought Mikey Keene should be the starter, and then we see John Rice struggle in games, and Mikey Keene comes in and has that game against Cincinnati and all that stuff. But you have John Rice. He's clearly the starter. There's no controversy. There's not really a competition to see who it's going to be. Timmy McClain has experience as a former starter at South Florida. He's already used up his free transfer. So even though he's not, entering the season as a starter, he's kind of limited. He doesn't have any more options unless he were to go down a level to FCS. So he kind of knows his role. He's coming in to be the backup, and you got Dylan Risk, who's kind of happy to be there as a true freshman, and he'll do whatever's needed. And I kind of feel like they're not gonna. I feel like they don't want to play him more than 4. Some people claim that have seen some practices. They kind of wonder if he's a guy who could, maybe eventually be that true number 2 backup this year. And then you got the quarterback transfer from Charlotte. I think he was wearing a gold jersey the other day. I'm not sure if he's completely healthy, but I just feel like everyone kind of has their role. But I never about to talk about John Rice. I just think for UCF's success this season, you just got to cross your fingers that he stays healthy.
Yeah. So let's switch over to JRP. So he's the clear cut number 1 guy. He had a whirlwind spring. He's the baseball player. He's going to football practice, planes, trains, automobiles, all that good stuff. And it's a big deal that he's coming in as the true number 1. So how do you think he's going to do this year? And let's go with Adam to start this time.
Well, look, as a fan, as an alum, I want him to have the best season of all time, right? I mean, I think we're all rooting and want JRP to be peak JRP. I don't know if we know what that is, but I think we're all rooting for him to take these alleged steps you've heard people take. I think it's really funny. Eric, you were talking about coaches and control freaks. And what I think is funny, and Brandon and Jason, you guys are there a lot as well. You're hearing the same talking points from every player that comes up. So much been improved this year. So much better with the ball. So much better in the pocket. Like, I don't know if it's a state media and they were like putting out stuff in the chairs in the locker room, but you're hearing a lot of the same stuff. And I hope all that's true, right? I really hope that actually is true. I think for me, there's 2 things I want to see JRP do. Number 1, Brandon just mentioned, that is stay healthy. He's got to limit the amount of hits he takes in his body. I can appreciate a quarterback who wants to run over the backup safety from Temple, but I'm also okay if you just want to slide and get the first down and keep it moving, right? So I don't think we need him to bulldoze everybody. The FAU flip in the end zone is an iconic photograph. I think, Brandon, you may have taken one of those photos, right? But I don't want to see that picture ever again in my life, because that means that he may be landing on something that's going to crack, and that's not good news for us. So I think health is important. And number 2, look, we can talk about accuracy and arm strength and all that stuff. For me, I think where he really had a challenge last year that I want to see him improve is decision-making. When to throw the ball away, when to take the sack, when to lay it on the line for the next play, when to go to the check down, when to go through reads. I feel like there are times where, and I know we all made this joke and everyone sort of laughed at, it's been 2-3 years since you played quarterback, but I want to understand, has his decision-making sped up? Is he going to make faster decisions, better decisions? I forget what game, I want to say Cincinnati. He threw like a horrendous interception on the sidelines. He was trying to like shovel it to Stephen Martin on a way out of bounds, and then it just literally just chuck into the Stephen Martin. And those are plays this year I want him to step out of bounds and not take a hit, keep it moving. So I think for me, I want him to do fantastic. I want all these state media quotes to be true. I want him to stay healthy, and I want to see if his decision making is improved in the offense.
Yeah, I think Adam too. I look back at the bowl game. He struggled mightily making decisions against Duke, where that was going. So Brandon, you brought up the topic of stay healthy. What else?
Yeah, I mean, I concur with everything that Adam said. And we've, state media, player speak, coach speak quotes. We've heard it that they're saying he's making better decisions, quicker decisions. I have heard from a couple of people that did attend one of the scrimmages recently. One of the donors, that they thought he was getting the ball out a lot quicker, and he was looking at more than just one read, which I think was a criticism last year. But the thing that I always come back to and kind of give him the benefit of the doubt, that we all talk about John Rice. Yeah, he's an older player. He's been playing college football since 2019, but he's only had 1 season in which he was the full-time starting quarterback. That was last year. So, and the only reason, he really played as a true freshman at Ole Miss is, there was an injury. He got in there and he didn't know what he's doing. He's a true freshman. That's why he was running around all over the place. He really wasn't. A lot of the things he went through last year, he was honestly going through for the first time. He hadn't experienced, a lot of this stuff before. So, the old adage that, coaches always say that players are going to make the biggest improvement from their freshman to sophomore year. Well, it's kind of the same. He's going to make, I feel like he should make a big improvement from his first year as a starter to his second year as a starting quarterback. But, like Adam said, he's got to be smart about it. I know he's the ultimate team guy. He's the competitor. He's the guy putting his head down, trying to get one more yard for a first down at Cincinnati when, he shouldn't be doing that. And then he gets, concussed. And, that was obviously an issue for him. He's just got to stop doing that. There are so many weapons on this team that he just has to distribute the ball. Now he's athletic. I mean, you don't want to take that ability from him. What makes him dynamic, I think, is his legs, but you got to be smart in how he is utilized. But like I said, we'll see, soon enough, what year 2 John Rice looks like, but I still believe that, it will be a remarkable improvement from year 1.
Eric.
I agree with what Brandon and Adam said. And the coaching staff, Gus has said this too, where he took some of the blame too for maybe I called some things that I shouldn't have called for JRP. Maybe I ran him too much. Maybe I called some passing plays that he just, was a low percentage play. Some of that too is getting familiar with what he can do and can't do from that standpoint. I agree about the progression from year 1 to 2. Decision-making is the big thing. All of this reminds me, if we did this roundtable in August of 2017, I feel like we'd be having the same conversation about McKenzie Milton going into the year. Hey, he's got to make better decisions than he did in 2016. So I'm not saying he's going to be McKenzie Milton, but we kind of forget he had great moments last year. He played well. He was the best player on the field against Tulane the first meeting. I think if he was healthy in the second meeting, they win that game. I don't think Tulane had an answer for him. So he's capable of that. It's about being consistent. We've seen the highs and the lows. He's got to be consistent. It goes back to what you guys are talking about, the decision-making, making the smart decision, throw the ball away, don't run for the extra yard, don't force a ball that you can't, but be consistent in your decision-making, and everything else will take care of itself. And I think the fan base on social media, we got to stop with, scrutinizing every throw he makes. He's not going to be like Dante Culpepper, airing it out in a beautiful spiral every throw. But he can get the job done, and he fits the Gus system, and we'll see how that goes this year. But he's a valuable playmaker, and I think he'll have a very strong year.
Jason.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Gus said he's night and day. I know he's a coach, and what else is he going to say? But is it really going to be night and day? I don't know. We don't get to watch anything, and especially I myself haven't been at camp at all this year. I went to media day and got to talk with John Rice. I think he's very similar to Darren Hinshaw, passionate about this, cares about this. And it's going to be really interesting to see how much different he looks. I think the decision-making is the biggest thing. There were times last year I was wondering if he knew he could throw the ball away or not, or if he knew how to slide. I mean, how did a baseball player not know how to slide? So decision-making leads to staying healthy. It leads to less turnovers. And it leads to his, if you can make the right decision, it leads to his playmaking abilities to really be on full showcase and get the ball to the right guys like Javon Baker, like Kobe Hudson, like Alec Holler. So, not just making the right decisions, but making them quickly. Obviously, this is challenging to do, but I think having Darren Hinshaw there is going to help him a lot. I mean, I had a great relationship with Chip Lindsey. He and I, by the end of last season, we talked on the field before the game. So all respect to Chip, but I do think Darren Hinshaw is a better quarterback coach in terms of developing and working and honing in on problems and being honest about those problems and saying this is what needs to be fixed and needs to be fixed before we start the season. Going back to Eric's point a few minutes ago about it's going to be less, I don't even know what word you want to say, less controversial. Everyone knows their role, that sort of thing. I do wonder if UCF had a better backup quarterback last year than they do this year. I think there's rumors that Dylan Risk is making a push. He's only a freshman. How good can he be? He didn't even early enroll. Timmy McClain obviously has experience, but there's question marks around how efficient he can be as well. Mikey Keaton was a really good quarterback. There was a reason why the quarterback battle was so close last year and why it was so contentious throughout the entire season. It is refreshing not to, deal with that back and forth. And I that was something I got to ask a lot of the players, like, how different is this fall camp knowing that John Rice is the guy? And they kind of all told me the same thing. It's from a confidence level, who's going to be there day one, and how things are going to play out. His style, his tendencies, and what he's really good at. And I think Darren Hinshaw was really able to come in and hone in on what he's bad at and help him improve. So, is he going to be night and day better than last year? I don't know. I mean, I think I agree with Brandon's point that, from year one being the start of the year two, certainly there should be improvement. But I'm excited to see, I think no disrespect to Kent State. I think at Boise State is really that first test for John Rice and him being on the road and being in an atmosphere like that. So it should be exciting to see. I hope he's, improved for sure.
I think one of the things we all agree upon, he is a phenomenal athlete. I mean, you cannot dispute that. I thought he was a hell of a center fielder in baseball. Like the way he, got on base and sparked things, and he brought a little bit of the football mentality to the baseball team. So, he showed leadership there. He has shown leadership on the football field. So I think, you can say he's a leader, he's an athlete, and he's got heart. So, I mean, he's got three very important things going for him well. And I think what I heard everybody say here, the one word is consistent, right? That's really kind of what it all boils down to when it's all said and done.
Well, and Jeff, you mentioned the baseball. I mean, there were people, I remember in fall, talking to people in the fall, during there were a lot of people that thought, well, maybe he's just going to be a pinch runner, for baseball. Well, really, we don't think he's that great of a baseball player. He got the center field starting job, and he had a heck of a year, like to your point, improved drastically, which is amazing because he didn't participate in fall ball and baseball, obviously, because he was doing football. So don't underestimate him from that standpoint. And Brandon, I know, got to go to a lot of the baseball games and cover. Baseball obviously not as covered and scrutinized as football was. So I was more of the outsiders thinking, all right, this John Rice, is this guy for real? But seeing him at how he handled himself around baseball, where there isn't as much coverage, he's legit. He's a legit person that is a stand-up person, a great representation for the program. And I think you described him very well, Jeff. And I think he's a guy to root for from that standpoint. But I want to emphasize the coaching staff has to help him.
Yeah,
we're letting him off the hook. You can't just, I remember last year in the season opener against the FCS school, I think it was South Carolina State, whatever. I was just livid how much he was running in the game. And I'm like, why is he running so much? You don't need to him to run in the game like this. And I would say the same thing going into Kent State. I would be disappointed if we're at the Kent State game and we're looking at his stats and he's running like 15 carries and running a ton. I'm like, what did we really accomplish? That's not going to get you in the long run. So to me, I know people want to, he's got to execute and he's got to be consistent. He's got to make the decisions, but the coaching staff has to put him in a position to succeed as well.
Yep. I totally agree with that. All right, so we've exhausted the offensive side of the ball, so let's move over to the defensive side of the ball. A new coordinator also in play here with Addison Williams. What do you expect to see there, Jason?
Yeah, I really like Addison Williams as a coach. I think he was always great to talk to up on the podium, and I think if we've heard good things about him internally, and obviously you're going to want to compare the defense from last year to this year. I think the one thing, obviously expectations-wise, that defensive line, it seems like it's at its strongest, and that's just the amount of players they have, the quality they have up front. The defensive line is going to really be the strength of this defense, and I think there's some question marks about where everybody lands in the secondary, but it seems like a fairly strong secondary. You have some experienced guys, some key transfers. I think the number one thing I'm going to be watching in that first game is whether or not the defense backs turn their head towards the ball. I mean, that was something that was so frustrating last year, where, you talk about JRP's decision-making and some of the decisions he would make, but the defensive backs not looking towards the ball sometimes were just so frustrating from an outsider's perspective. I'm not saying it's easy to play corner. It's probably one of the most difficult positions out there. You're really on an island. You're on your own. They take it really seriously. But I think from a coaching perspective and what things might be different under Addison Williams, because he's the defensive backs coach as well, working with Coach Gibbs, I'll be curious to see how their technique and what they do on the field this season. But I think that defensive line, obviously, it's really talented. I'm excited to watch John Walker in college and how that translates from high school to college and whatnot. But the defensive line is certainly going to be the strength of this unit.
Eric?
I'm intrigued to see how much difference do we see from a scheme standpoint, from Addison, who was on the staff, from what Travis called, and Travis got, did a good job, but, at times I was critical for maybe being too vanilla, perhaps, a secondary maybe playing a too further back. Obviously the defense fell apart late last year. who do you believe in it? Some people think it was because Travis maybe was looking at other jobs in the SEC at the time. Some people think it was just the talent caught up with him. Who knows? I'm very curious to see what Addison comes up with from a scheme standpoint. How drastically different is it going to be from what we've seen the previous couple of years? Younger secondary, to Jason's point, the defensive line has to be good. Has to be good to help. No one's a better friend to a young secondary than a good defensive line that can put pressure on the quarterback. So I am intrigued to see the scheme from Addison. Very good. I talked to him at media day. He knows what he's doing. Obviously, Gus trusts him. Addison said it meant a lot to him too. He knows Gus very well. So I did like the move, but I'm curious to see how drastic is the difference schematically than what we've seen the last couple of years. It might be. Do they pressure more? Do they hide some coverages some more? I'm really intrigued to see that. We talk so much about let's see what we're going to see from the offense. Well, we don't know what we're going to see from the defense. Are we going to see something drastically different, or are we going to see similar stuff than what we've seen the last couple of years?
Brandon.
I'll say this about Addison Williams taking over as defensive coordinator. I think Gus had kind of planned this out. There was it was about a year ago, around this time, probably this same week, before game week. Gus is, he's kind of set in his ways. He likes to be the primary spokesman, and he allows coordinators to do regular interviews. He doesn't typically allow assistant coaches to do interviews outside of one day at media day in early August. And UCF kind of scheduled an additional availability, probably would have been this time, maybe on a Thursday, Friday before it was game week. And it was specifically to talk to Addison Williams, and which was interesting because we don't really talk to assistants. Travis Williams, T-Will was the D coordinator. And I just kind of remember I was there early, and Addison Williams was kind of hanging out. I don't think maybe practicing it early. I might've been the only media person in the room. And we were just talking, and, he was just telling me, Gus kind of wanted to see how I do in this setting. Kind of wanted to see me do one of these press conferences. So, you put two and two together. And I think that was just one element of Gus, trying to, kind of see if he'd be ready for this role with the increased scrutiny and answering questions from media. Just one of the many elements that the responsibilities are increased when you are a defensive coordinator outside of just the football and dealing with players. So I think Gus kind of saw this coming. I think, he always knew, Travis Williams, T-Will was going to be an up and comer. There's a good chance he was going to get an opportunity to move on, which he did. He's at Arkansas now. So, and then when he left, I don't think it was, maybe the rumor had been out for a couple hours. I'm trying to remember the timeline of how things transpired in December. He was announced for Arkansas, and within the hour, I think they were, Gus pretty much gave the job to Addison Williams, and they told the team. There was no thought process whatsoever of considering anybody else besides Addison Williams. So that tells you something. That tells you that Gus Malzahn obviously thinks very highly of him. He felt like he was ready for this role, and he's kind of groomed him to be this up and coming defensive coach back when he was, I guess, an analyst. I forgot what year it was. Was it 2017? Back at Auburn a few years ago, he had, Addison had kind of, been coaching at, the 1AA level, and had been at Furman, and, he took the job with Auburn. And so he's kind of always been on this track. And from I've heard nothing. Not like I would really say the opposite, but it's true. I've never heard one bad word about Addison Williams. The players love him. I remember when they brought him in for the press conference, and Jason, you probably remember this too. A bunch of defensive players, they wanted to support him. They wanted to show the support. They were all, remember Nikai Martinez, the Henderson twin, a bunch of the guys were sitting, kind of among us, watching his press conference because they were so excited for him. And so, yeah, from that end, I think he's going to be a tremendous fit. I want to see it in person, just like offense. We don't really see anything. We have one element that's got to improve, and they've talked about it, and that's forcing turnovers. That's interceptions. UCF had 6 the entire season. 3 of them went to Devod Wilson. And I think 2 of those 3 were just lucky, I'm there. Maybe I was in the wrong spot, but then, the ball got deflected some weird way, and somehow I I got bailed out. And so, they weren't really, I remember some of those interceptions were so lucky. So UCF as a team only had 6. DeCorian Patterson, one of the many DB transfers UCF brought in. And Middle Tennessee last year, he had 7. Just him. Just he had more than the entire UCF team. And then you look at guys, you talk about, corners not looking back for the ball. You have Corey Thornton, who has pretty much been a starter ever since he arrived in 2020. He's pretty much started every game he's been healthy. I think he had a concussion issue after that. I think that Louisville game in 2021, I can't remember. He may have missed a few games then, but he's pretty much been a full-time starter ever since 2020. And he had 1 interception in 2020, and he hasn't had one since. I mean, a guy who's played more than anyone else at that corner spot. He has 1 interception in 3 years. So obviously that's a focus. They talk about doing different things, with disguising coverages, and they've got a lot of stuff they're planning on doing that's going to be different, I guess, from what T. Will did. So I'm excited to see it. I do think it starts with the defensive line. That's clearly the depth if you look at that side of the ball. I think the transfer portal obviously came up huge in trying to build that depth, because we know at the beginning of last season with guys injured or some guys kind of by that championship game, they know they're hitting the portal, and what their effort was like in that game. I don't know if it was 100%. So the depth just wasn't there defensively towards the end of the year. We'll see how it shakes out, who starts and who's in the 2D, but there's a lot of guys who have played, between linebacker and bringing in, the 2 guys who played a lot last year with Jason Johnson and Ryan Davis. Jason Johnson and Walter Yates, and then you bring in transfers like Ryan Davis and Isaiah Paul, and some of the younger guys like Cam Moore, and you got the DBs. I mean, there's a bunch of guys, who have played, at other schools in addition to the returning players. So there's a lot of depth there, and like I said, it's going to be interesting because they're going to be thrown into the fire, and they're going to have to defend Big 12, offenses. That's not an easy task. I mean, I know it's different dynamic, because UCF's known they've been going into the Big 12, but if this team would easily be the preseason favorite to just run all over the AAC, and we're all just kind of waiting to see how this team translates to this higher level of competition.
Adam.
Yeah, let me start with Addison Williams first off. I absolutely love the hire. I think it's awesome to see a guy get opportunities like this. And to Brandon's point, I've never heard a negative word said about Addison Williams. And I'm also far from the person who would ever break news on this show, looking at the faces here. But I was told that he had other opportunities around the same time Teal was leaving. He was in demand. So it tells you that Gus prioritized keeping him and putting him on the staff, and Brandon kind of laid the timeline out. So it's clear how much Gus valued him. I think the second thing I'd say is, with respect to Addison Williams, and again, kind of lending to what Brandon said, in today's college football, as soon as you see a coordinator leaving for another school, I mean, fire up the transfer portal tracker, right? Because typically half the team jumps in to leave with the coordinator. And outside of one person who left by other means that had nothing to do with football specifically, I mean, all these guys stay together, right? So I think that tells you how much they respect Addison Williams, how much they like Addison Williams, how much, this team means to them. So I think that speaks well to the kind of person Addison Williams is. Now, to Brandon's point, does that turn into him being a world-class defensive coordinator? Only time will tell, but I think he's got the building blocks, and I think he's got the foundation to do that. For me, my biggest question is I think we all agree that the line is going to be the strength of the defense, right? I think we know we got the big boys up front. They're going to do a good job. How quickly can they figure out what that back 7 looks like and what that rotation is, right? Because they're going to try a bunch of guys probably in the first game, but then we got Boise, try a bunch of guys in the second game. How long is going to take them to figure out that mix, right? Who are the linebackers? Who are the 4 or 5 secondary players? I think there's a glutton of names in the secondary, and I assume they have, to Brandon's point, they're 1 and 2 deep, but a lot of these guys have never played together before. So how long will it take them to kind of get that mix, figure that rotation out? And what does that growing pain look like while we go through that process? I think there's plenty of guys who have opportunity. I think there's plenty of names out there. I think there's plenty of experience. I really like Gus's strategy. I think, a lot of people kind of scoff their nose at it, but I like Gus going to maybe lower tier schools or FCS schools and finding guys with experience and bringing them in and letting them play. I think we've had a lot of experience with that. I think we've had a lot of positivity with that. So how quickly can that back 7 sort of figure themselves out? What's the rotation look like? And how quickly can we understand who it is that's going to be relied on back there? But look, I think I'm really excited for Addison Williams. I think he's the kind of guy I think we all want to root for. And it sounds like the players want to play for him. I agree with Jason, though, if they just turn their head around, that'd be a lot better.
That would certainly help a lot. I look at the situation, I always have that first thought, when the guy is promoted from within, take over the coordinator role from the guy that's leaving, right? And I'm always wondering, when play calls were happening last season, do you think, Addison Williams might be thinking, I might have blitzed there instead of doing what we just did. You kind of always wonder, if they had that thought process going on. But the other part of this is continuity, right? Where, you got a guy that's been there. You don't have to bring in another coordinator who may change things up. Obviously he will change things will fit his style that we will soon be introduced to. But, I think the continuity thing is an important thing. And if he's got all this respect that everybody has proclaimed he has, I think this is definitely a good maneuver for the Knights as far as that is concerned. All right, so let's talk MVPs on offense and defense. And Adam, take it away.
I'm going to stay away from JRP. I think that's the obvious answer, right? If UCF has a good season, JRP is the MVP. So I'll take him off the board just to make this more fun. I wanted to go with RJ Harvey. I think that's going to be another popular name. Obviously, I think he'll get a lot of running back carries. I don't think you can go with a receiver. I think I heard Eric say this on another show last night that there's too much depth at receiver, I think, for one guy to really kind of stand out in that spot. So I'm going to go off the board. I'm going to go DeMarcus Bowman. I have no idea why. I think he's got some speed. He's got some power. I think RJ Harvey, I had the knee injury. He's obviously a little slower than DeMarcus Bowman. He kind of reminds me a little bit of a bigger, thicker, more physical Adrian Killins, right? So if you combined maybe the late Otis Anderson with Adrian Killins, I think you get some form of a DeMarcus Bowman. And I wonder how Gus and Darren can use him. So I'll go off the board. I'll go DeMarcus Bowman. I wouldn't put any amount of money that means something to me on that bet, but I'll go off the board. I think RJ Harvey's a safe pick as well. On defense, I'm also going to try to go off the board, but not too far. I think it's Ricky Barber. I think we need that guy in the middle that can stuff the run, put pressure on the quarterback. If you get the D tackle, a quarterback hates having pressure in their face, at their feet. If Ricky Barber can get pressure up the middle and force a quarterback to go to his left or his right, maybe that sets up, Tremont Morris-Brass, Josh Elliscar for some sacks. So I'm going to go with Ricky Barber just as that run stuffer, line disruptor, making key, tackles for loss. He's obviously not going to lead the team in tackles. I hope he doesn't lead the team in interceptions, because if he does, we got much bigger problems. But I'm going to go Ricky Barber as my defensive MVP.
Brandon.
Yeah, I agree with Adam that you kind of have to take John Rice off the board, because if he has a season that, a lot of people think he's going to have or hoping he's going to have, he's easily going to be the MVP in practice. And that's no fun to do that. And, and to his point, it's tough to pick a wide receiver just because they're going to distribute the ball around, and it's tough to have one guy that makes such a difference. And it's tough. I'm intrigued by the DeMarcus Bowman pick, because that's a name that I think a lot of people don't know a lot about yet, other than his background of being a 5-star recruit out of Lakeland. And but I'm going to go with RJ Harvey. That's kind of the easy pick if you can't go with JRP, just because, you expect, his role is going to be prominent within that rushing attack. And, he's going to get, the bulk of the carries that Isaiah Bowser got last year in some of the situations. Although I don't know how UCF's going to try to keep all those guys happy. There's a lot of people in that running back room that, between Johnny Richardson and, you talk about DeMarcus Bowman, and they're bringing up Mark Anthony Richards the other day. Remember him? He played a big role in the team a couple of years ago, and you got Jordan McDonald. And that's the thing these days, that you got to keep everybody happy, and because, you want to have depth, and if you don't, they're going to maybe they'll hit the transfer portal anyway. It doesn't matter, but you want to feel like everyone has a role. And so, that's sort of how I feel like maybe Herb Hand is seeing the light in terms of, we'll see what happens with it, but he's talked about, rotating amongst the offensive line, because I think you have to, because you got to feel like these guys have a role and get playing time. But I'll go with RJ Harvey. I think we saw his breakout last year, and I think he's poised for a really big season. On the other side of the ball, defense, I agree with Ricky Barber. That easily could have been my choice as well, but I'm going to go with Tremont Morris-Brash. I just feel like he's been at UCF a long time. He's fairly healthy going into this year. He led the team in sacks. I feel like he's poised to have a big year to do the same. I know he's looking to I think it was 6 sacks off the top of my head, something like that last year. But I think he's looking to get, maybe he's talking about doing that double-digit mark. So, I've heard a lot of good things about him, and I think he's going to have a really good season this fall.
Eric?
Yeah, JRP is the obvious answer on the offensive side. Otherwise, it's going to be a long, long year. I think that, the running backs, that's a hot potato. There's so many names in there. A name that I'm intrigued by the way, Gamage, the wide receiver kid from Marshall, the transfer. I'm curious to see how he's there with Baker and fits in there with Baker and Hudson. Adam mentioned that other show. Adam and I do a lot of shows now. It's tough to keep up, but I just think there's a lot of the production is going to be spread out all over the place. So to me, it all comes down to JRP. If he's got to be good, he's the MVP there. But I think Gamage is a guy to keep in mind there. Baker as well. The wideouts, I think, are the two guys. If I can't pick JRP, that would be the selections on the offensive side. Defensively, I'm just going to complete the defensive line there. Go with Celisar. I think he's the guy that's primed that could have a big year, put some pressure in the defense. I would pick him. Another name, Quadric Bullard, defensive back, if he earns the job there. Their defense wasn't the same when he got hurt last year as well. So could that have played a role in some of their struggles in the secondary? We'll see. He could be that key guy there. So I'm cheating. I understand, Jeff. I'm cheating on your question because I'm giving you multiple answers, but I feel like it's better to give you multiple answers considering we all may agree on the same guy.
That's okay. We don't have hard and firm rules here, as in we have none. So it's all good. Jason.
Yeah, it was interesting to think about this question. Who would have been the MVP last year, looking back at it? And the name that comes to my mind in terms of like most valuable, which is what MVP stands for, Alec Collar. I think Alec Collar had the Holler Hop, right? And then the Holy Holler Catch, right?
Yeah.
So in terms of clutch plays, and he's always going to be there. He's consistently one of the guys who's just catching touchdowns and making big plays. And he's like John Rice Plumlee's best friend at UCF. I think Alec Collar was the MVP of the offense this year. And I might even say over John Rice Plumlee, because I really think Alec's going to be that guy for John Rice, where, yes, there's Javon Baker and Kobe Hudson and Corey Gamage, the transfer that Eric mentioned in the running back room and whatnot. But I'll say Alec Collar, my offensive MVP, because of his leadership skills, because of his long standing in the locker room, and what he can do up field and his clutch plays that he had last year. I think he's going to be a really valuable player, not the best player, but valuable, which is what MVP is. And then defensively, I would have also said Ricky Barber as well, but just to switch it up, I'll say Jason Johnson. I think on the defensive side, you talk about value, right? Most valuable defensive player to me is probably Jason Johnson. He's going to lead the team tackles. He's probably going to be calling a lot of the shots on defense, helping Addison and Williams. Just a veteran at linebacker, which seems to be a position that UCF it almost feels like musical chairs with the amount of transfers they brought in. So I think in terms of figuring that position out, the quarterback of the defense, I think Jason Johnson on defense is really important and valuable for them.
Jason, I really like your pick of Alec Collar. I was thinking about him too, but the funny thing about Alec Collar for you guys to think about, every year we're all excited about the other tight end, right? Last year was Kamari Gamble, right? This year you're hearing a lot of Randy Pittman. For a while it was the late Jake Hescock. It was Charlie Browder. There's always the other tight end, and then there's Alec Collar. And every year he's the one who ends up coming up big too. So I thought it was funny this year. There's a lot of Randy Pittman love, which is fantastic. He may turn out to be a really good player. But it just reminds me every year we're always excited about that other tight end. And at the end of the year, it's Alec Collar who's there as sort of the most valuable and the guy you can rely on. So you may have a sneaky good pick there, Jason.
There we go.
Yes, and he was sneaky because he got it before I did, because that was going to be my off-the-wall pick as well. So kudos to you on that, Jason. I like that pick as well. And for the defense, I do want it to be somebody on the defensive line, right? Because as we attested to earlier, if we're pressuring the quarterback and stuff in the run game, the secondary stuff will take care of itself, right? So that would definitely be my hope, that our defensive MVP is on the defensive line. All right. So this is kind of a polarizing question, I think, to some people. What is considered a successful season for UCF in its first Big 12 season? Jason? You're on mute.
I'm sorry about that.
That's all right.
It's interesting, Gus Malzahn and the coaches aren't afraid to say their goal is to win the Big 12. which it should be the goal. I think if your coach isn't wanting to win a conference title, then there should be some questions about that. I don't think UCF's going to win the conference championship this year. Maybe there are some fans saying shame on you, but just thinking realistically, I think what you should consider success this year is finishing best among the newcomers. And that probably means making a bowl game, which I think is an important piece of the year one success. But I think if you can finish best among the newcomers, you're probably pretty happy with that, and you're probably going to a bowl game. So that's what I consider success. Obviously, there are levels of success, but for me personally, that's where I think if UCF is above the other three schools in the Big 12, I think that's going to be big for them.
Yeah, and you look at Cincinnati, he's going to be a different team now with Luke Fickell gone, and Houston will have a new quarterback. So there's good opportunity for that to happen too. So there you go. Eric.
I think success is get to a bowl game with a winning, preferably with 7-5, 8-4. I think that would be a success. Obviously, anything better is great. I made this reference on the show Adam referred to earlier there that if you play bowl games with a Pop-Tart, if me and Brandon are hanging out on a sideline in December in Orlando having some Pop-Tarts from the Pop-Tart Bowl there, now that's called at Camping World, where Beede can swing by from the Amway Center and say hello. I don't know if Adam would drive or not, but that's one of the Big 12 bowl games now is Orlando against the ACC. I've covered that bowl game many a time, so that would be a success if you get to a quality bowl game like that. And have a good season. And I think it's important for them to have a good season. We've talked, and Brandon and Jason have done a great job, and Brandon in particular has covered all this from the recruiting angle and how fantastic they're recruiting. But you got to produce it on the field. And I think you want to build that, continue that momentum by having a good year. We know it's a challenging schedule and things could go wrong, but boy, if this team has a bad year, you're going to hear it from a lot of people. Like, you see, what did we tell you guys? It's a little different at this level. So, to me, that's the success. Get to that bowl game in Orlando or better with a winning season. I think would be a success to go to the bowl game, considering the schedule they had. I think if UCF had to do it, if they knew what was coming and tell the future that they were going to be in the Big 12 this year, they probably don't schedule the Boise State game on the road because of travel. I mean, they're going to travel a ton. So this is a challenging schedule overall. So I think 7-5 and 8-4 would be very successful. I know people will disagree with that. In particular, someone that Adam does a weekly show with on a pod would apparently get flips out anytime somebody would suggest that we could lose a game or two. But
Eric,
I think that
leave Trace out of this.
Fair. Yeah, you're right. You're right. I shouldn't be talking behind him. So I think that would be a successful year if we're all hanging out in Orlando in the bowl game, having some Pop-Tarts from the bowl committee there.
All right, Brandon, you in favor of the Pop-Tarts?
Yeah, I personally would be in favor of that, but I just wonder if that's even going to be a realistic possibility. We talk about, there's obviously, we're all talking about the TDT and the tourist development tax and the whole goal of those bowl games is to bring in, tourists from outside Orlando to fill up hotel rooms and economic impact and all those studies and stuff. So I kind of wonder if it's kind of a little competition right now between, Camping World, Florida Citrus Sports Group, and UCF, and everyone wants a chunk of that TDT. And what's UCF if they're in that bowl game? I mean, there's some people that live outside Orlando, but it's not going to fill up that many hotel rooms versus, like, say if it's like, Kansas State or Iowa State, whoever, they're gonna come to Central Florida and go to the theme parks and stay in the hotels that I'm not sure UCF fans would. So to that, and I was thinking about that today, like, how realistic is that bowl game? Should we, if UCF is going to a bowl, is it going to be the Liberty Bowl or the Independence Bowl? There was some, I forgot, it was ESPN. I saw something they had UCF predicted to go to one of those Phoenix bowl games. That was where it is. So I don't know, but to your point, to the original question, what would be considered a successful year? I totally agree with that. Would be reaching a bowl game. Although, I think that's on the very low end. I think just, I think UCF and, as others have stated, their aspirations are much grander than that. It's not just make a bowl game. It's like 6-6 and just, sneak into some sort of postseason. They have their eyes set on the Big 12 championship. I mean, we'll see if that's a realistic goal or not. Obviously, the early part of the conference season will tell us a lot. But the thing about it now is, we're kind of in a different territory, a different dynamic where UCF and the American you got to pretty much, if you want to be in that mix for New Year's Six or whatever, you got to win. You got to win every game pretty much. You got to go, close, got to go undefeated or very close to it. And UCF's in a position now where, it's okay to lose a game. I mean, I know that's you don't want to go crazy with it, but it's okay to lose a game because if you rebound, you can still be in an excellent shot to do something. But early on, we'll know because that schedule is very front loaded. When you start off at Kansas State, the defending Big 12 champion, you got Baylor at home, you got to go on the road to Kansas State, you've got Oklahoma. There's some games you'll know, right? I'm not going to say that the second half of the schedule is easy, but I think it's a little bit more manageable when you look at, you've got, Cincinnati and West Virginia and Houston and, some teams that, I feel like UCF should have an advantage against. I mean, we'll see how it all plays out, but, you got Oklahoma State in there too, but, we'll have a pretty good idea, but yeah, I'd say successful obviously is making a bowl game. I haven't really, I'm going to come up with my season record prediction soon. I haven't made a final decision on that, but I think this is a team that if all goes well, if all goes right, John Rice has the year that everyone's hoping that he has. He stays healthy. The team as a whole stays largely healthy. I think it's a team that has a chance. Now, maybe it's me drinking the Kool-Aid or being the biggest UCF homer there is. I think there's a chance this team can win 10 games.
That's all right. So our early leader for bold prediction coming from Brandon there. And by the way, if they go to the Pop-Tart Bowl, I'll help the economy. I'll go stay at a 5-star in town just to help out there. So you can do that. Adam.
Yeah, it's really tough when you put the word season record, reasonable, and Sons of UCF all in the same sentence. That typically isn't a strength of our particular program. And not trying to disappoint my friend UCF Mike here, but I agree with Brandon. I think the absolute ceiling or absolute floor for this is bowl game. I think that's the absolute floor. I think that has to be that. I'm doing zero empirical research, but here's the way I'm looking at this, right? By the time we play Oklahoma, that'll be our 7th conference game. November 11th, 3 games to go. I want to still be mathematically eligible for a championship bowl game berth by that point. To me, that's a success. I'm not saying we go to the championship game. We may lose those last 3 games. We may stub our toe. We may be only mathematically alive if cats and dogs fall out of the sky. But come that game, I want to at least have some sort of mathematical chance to be able to play for the Big 12 championship game. And to me, if we're there that late in the season, I'll call it a success. Now, we could blow all those 3 games and all of a sudden have a terrible record, but I think if we're there and we're still in this thing down the stretch a little bit, I'll call it a success. And to Brandon's point, I think we'll learn from that. We'll figure out how to adjust and maybe even ascend from that. But that's my floor is bowl game. My great hope is that we're still mathematically alive somewhere down the stretch to potentially sneak into the Big 12 championship game.
It's interesting. You bring up the level of competition, right? So, this is no longer the AAC. This is a whole different level of competition we're playing for a conference schedule. And then the thing that I believe Eric alluded to earlier, travel is a big impact this season. We're going to be traveling much more than we ever have. And it'll be interesting to see what impact that is going to have on the team this year. So, I definitely would agree. The floor is a bowl game.
It's to the point that I think Eric was making a few minutes ago in terms of how important this season is for momentum. I know we're laser focused on this moment this year and how it's going to be like and what it's going to be like to play these teams and how's UCF going to do. But there's a lot of seniors. There's a lot of players that are out of eligibility after this year. The starting quarterback, John Rice, is one of them. That defensive line, a lot of those guys are going to be moving on. Jason Johnson's not, he doesn't have any more years of eligibility. Those receivers, Javon Baker and Kobe Hudson, I think each technically might have 1 year left, but those guys, they want to do everything they can to get to the NFL and to the next level. So, RJ Harvey's the same way. I mean, there's a lot of guys who are going to be playing this year like it's their last. And so from a recruiting standpoint, obviously UCF high school recruiting has been great, but they're going to have to hit the portal. I mean, they want to have a season to show that they're on the upswing in this Big 12. Next year's big, you're going to go on the road and play Florida, and that's the game that everyone's circled on their calendar. And right now we don't know who that quarterback's going to be. There's a lot of stuff that's going to, next off season might be more interesting in some respects, in terms of just roster management and putting everything together than this past one was. But it's going to be big, and you want to have that, but you want to have the buzz of being in the mix, like to Adam's point. And that's one thing I thought about too. If you can enter that final month of November being mathematically in the, if you want to get to that Texas Tech game, a lot of people are, Texas Tech is a kind of that sleeper team that a lot of people think, beyond Texas or whoever, could be in the hunt. You want that game to mean something, that next to last a weekend in Lubbock, Texas. And so I think if UCF can kind of show that, that they're going to be a major player in this Big 12, of course, then, the next year it's going to have Utah and Arizona State, Colorado, all these teams are going to be coming in. But it's an important year for UCF and Gus Malzahn because, I we'll have to see how the numbers work with scholarships. I know they're signing a bigger high school class than they usually do, but it's going to be a big season to kind of replenish everything for 2024.
Yeah. So what you're also saying too is the impact is, okay, the winning will help the branding, right? Because that's kind of a key element in all this. That UCF first season of Big 12, they rattled the cage a little bit.
I mean, with sometimes of this, NIL stuff, I don't know, sometimes this matters as much because some of this NIL things, it's all that matters is what the collective is offering you. But yeah, you want to have a season, you want to recruit a quarterback. Like I said, I don't know if it's Dylan Risk, it's Timmy McClain. I mean, right now I would tend to think, next year's starting quarterback is not yet on this roster. Mm-hmm. And so, you want to have the buzz of, that's going to help you recruit as well. You're looking for maybe another John Rice type, someone that it's not necessarily about, the money or the NIL. They want to come and play and win. And, they just kind of want to be plug and play. And, they're going to have players around them. And you can do that a lot easier if you feel like you're on the upswing, and you've proven, they talk about, everyone comes up with these lists and tiers and big game boomer. Well, all these things I've been seeing on Twitter about who's going to be, the upper echelon of the new Big 12. And everyone's saying UCF is going to be right up there. Like, this is a good year to actually prove it.
Yeah.
Even though it's just year one.
Yes. And I can always count on you for recruiting. So that's you hit that right on the right.
I saw a lot of nodding from Beede too.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
I agree with Brandon. I don't think the starting quarterback for next year is on the roster, but that's just my take as someone who's departing the beat. I can say those things. I have some wiggle room.
Yes. Well, speaking of that, so our next question, all but Jason knows is coming. Since Jason is going to be heading over to cover the Orlando Magic as their beat writer, who's already started, as a matter of fact. So our question to the rest of the panel is, what is your favorite memory of Jason Beede during his time covering UCF football? Adam?
Yeah, I'm probably at a disadvantage. I don't think I've ever even met Jason in person. And so I'm at a disadvantage to the other guys on the screen. But I'll just say this. When, we started this little rinky-dink podcast outfit and we were trying to figure out a way to make it work, out of the blue, I DM'd Jason and just said, hey, would you come on the show? And within like 10 minutes, you're up like, yeah, sure. What time do you need me? And came on the show and gave us like an hour of his time, and then would come on whenever he asked him to, would always support us, send his DMs on stuff, hit me in the DMs if there was a really good interview. So he had no reason to be nice to me. He didn't know me. I'm not a name in the media space. He had no reason to be nice to me and to give me his time, but he always did that. And I always appreciate the way he represented UCF. He never got himself in any controversy. He was never a clickbait guy. He was never somebody that was going out looking for headlines and trying to become a Paul Feinbaum in this world. So I'm just glad that he was gracious with his time with us, and I'm really glad that we share a degree from the same school. And I can't wait to watch him cover basketball, and hopefully he'll be nice one day, because Brandon said reporters get tickets. If he gets Heat tickets for the playoffs, I'll make sure I hit Jason up for some tickets, man. But I can't wait to watch what you do with the Magic be, Jason. It's gonna be really weird, like turn on an NBA TV one night and there's Jason Beede, being interviewed in the hallway of the Comcast Center in Philadelphia. But I know I'm really proud for you, man. Really excited for you.
Brandon.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because I sort of feel like I've seen Jason grow up. I mean, we've been talking and we've been friends since probably your freshman year, I feel like. And at first I feel like, you were into photography, and you were helping out Juan at Nights 247, and we'd be on the field a lot. And so we'd be talking to each other and about UCF, and then, you know, your role enhanced and increased, and, you know, you were more than just a photographer. You were really good. You know, you were a really good writer. You were really good in your interviewing skills. You know, it's one of those things where, you know, and then obviously, you know, then you were able to parlay that into for the Orlando Sentinel. Is that I completely forgot how young you really still are, you know, because it's one of those things. I feel, you know, I've known you your entire college career. I've known you in your post-college career, and, you know, you're one of our peers, and it just feels like you're in your third. I know you're not in your 30s, but it just feels like you've been covering UCF forever, and it's just been a blast, kind of watching your growth, and just, you know, how I guess you were kind of this young boy, you know, from Key West, and, you know, talking about your background there. And I always loved kind of, you know, picking your brain and hearing about your experiences. You're on the swim team, and you tell me about all the, you know, Key West football players that came out of there and all that stuff, and just kind of see you grow up and to the man you are now. And it's just been a lot of fun. And, you know, I'm not sure we'll still see each other. I know you're not going to be completely, you know, foreign from UCF while you're busy with the Magic, but I'm extremely proud of you and everything, and just it's been awesome just kind of watching this journey of yours.
Yeah. And Jason, relish being called young for as long as you can. Eric?
Well, I think with Jason, you have to, when you talk about him covering UCF, you can't just say just strictly to football. I mean, he took the beat of the Orlando Sentinel and covered it, but how it was supposed to be. And that covered everything UCF related, whether it be what goes on with football on the field, what goes on with football off the field. He would interview guys like Terry Mahajer, but he was also at all the events. He was at UCF basketball. He was in Stores, Connecticut for women's basketball when they're in the NCAA tournament. He was at the softball regionals in Orlando when UCF hosted. He was in Tallahassee for the softball regionals this past year. So he committed to covering UCF athletics as the beat writer in the Sentinel. You know, and Brandon, obviously I mentioned earlier, has been this for 22 years. Him and I have talked for many years. Every time there's a different Orlando Sentinel UCF beat person, and we're kind of like, is this person going to be invested in UCF? Are they going to cover it? And Jason was 100% committed. I think people genuinely enjoyed it. You know, and Brandon could chime in. I mean, Paul Tenario was another one that was fantastic, and he's gone on to do great things with the MLS as one of the lead guys in covering soccer as a whole. I think Jason's headed to that same direction with the Magic. When you think of the Magic beat writer role in the Sentinel, that is as prime of a position as it gets, going back to Brian Schmitz and Tim Poftak to Josh Robbins, and the list goes on and on.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a big deal. Nobody just gets handed that role. And I think he's going to hit big on that. I hope for his sake, the Magic get improved and get to some meaningful games so he can get that exposure that Adam's talking about on NBA TV, because he certainly deserves that. And I'm certainly excited for him on that opportunity. It's a loss for UCF fans from the standpoint of the coverage, because he did, like I said, an in-depth, fantastic job. And he wasn't shy about covering UCF stuff that maybe wasn't the most positive either, which is not easy to do as well. So I have the utmost respect and admiration. I'm just excited for him, and I look forward to crossing paths with him at a Magic game or two there.
And to your point, Eric, you talk about, you know, you mentioned Paul Tenorio. When you look at, you know, I've been around for a while, so I've known all the kind of beat writers that you know, this Sentinel has had, dating back to the late 90s. And UCF fans are kind of, they can be kind of mean and kind of, you know, towards the Orlando Sentinel. They can get kind of nitpicky, and, you know, you didn't cover this, or, you know, a headline was this, you know, how come, you know, the Gators were in this topic, you know. So it's always been an ongoing thing, right? But everyone grew to love Paul Tenorio, and everyone loved Jason Beede. Like, I don't think any fans ever, you know, had any negative, or, you know, they've been petty. Like, give me some of these other beat writers. I mean, you know, they probably didn't deserve some of the stuff they got, but the fan base, because they knew where Beede came from. I mean, you know, he was going to be fair and impartial, but, you know, they knew he was a UCF alum, and his heart is in the right place. And he obviously did a great job. That really didn't matter. He could have been an alum from anywhere else. He was going to do the job the exact same way. But think about Jason, everyone loved him. And I'm sure as the Orlando Magic fan community gets to know him better, if maybe they weren't UCF fans, I'm sure they'll love him the same way the UCF fan base did.
Yeah. So Jason, before I let you chime in, so I'll echo Adam's statement, because same with me, you know, my meager little podcast, and I reach out to you, and I'll be happy to come on, and you've come on every time I ever asked, and I always greatly appreciated that. And then I'm also kind of mad about this because I feel like you've elevated UCF coverage to such an extent now, and I will go on record saying this, even though he's a very experienced college football writer, Matt Burchell has big shoes to fill, as far as I'm concerned, in covering UCF sports. So all I can say is, man, you've done such a great job, and we appreciate all the work you've done. And now we will turn it to you, and you can kind of give us your favorite memory or memories as much as you want, since we've roasted you here for a few minutes.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I remember the first ever UCF question I asked at a press conference. And that was like a really big thing because I was just a freshman photographer and didn't really know a lot of people at that time and whatnot. And in retrospect, I remember afterwards, I think Brandon and this is when Shannon Green was still on the beat and Juan, and like that was after the last home game when it was really controversial. Mackenzie and Justin Holman, I asked, you can go back and watch the video. It was like right before I asked the question, there was some heated question about the quarterback, and Scott was like really upset. And I asked him, my very first question was something along the lines of like, it was just such a softball question, right? I mean, I wasn't going to ask him this crazy question, but the first question I ever asked was, what was some of your favorite memories you made your first year at the home games as a head coach? And then I remember after the press conference, a bunch of reporters, who I knew at the time, just still growing the beat, they were just kind of like, thanks for like cooling things off, So that was one of my first memories I have, really, asking questions in the press conference and whatnot. But obviously, I was lucky to be around 2017, go to the Peach Bowl. I was at not just that Peach Bowl game, but the Fiesta Bowl and Taj McGowan's big run. Just so many great moments on the field. I was at UCF Duke. I was in Storrs, Connecticut. I was, I really got to be around, a lot of really great moments in UCF athletics history, and I was lucky to cover those moments. And as Eric said, there's been a lot of off-field stuff that I've covered as well. So I just think the relationship I had with people inside UCF, past presidents and past ADs and the current administration as well. They respected me and I respected them, and they knew the job I had to do. And, it was just great to, it really amplified. I think a lot of people ask me when I made the jump from 24/7 to the Sentinel, like what that was like. And I think this past year, especially, more and more people started recognizing me. I think being around Brandon on the sidelines, he would take photos of fans in the stands and, send them. And I wasn't at that level, but it got to a point where, I would be leaving, Memphis after Mikey King started the game. And people were, as I was walking on the plane, people would ask me, who's starting next week? And I'm like, I don't know, man. Like, I'm just trying to get home, So, it obviously grew, and I think UCF fans are going to really miss me. But I told Gus, I'm not like, I still live in Orlando. I still am going to be a supporter of UCF, and I might be at the Kent State game. Who knows? I mean, I'm excited to see how UCF does in the Big 12, and but it's been absolutely a pleasure to know you guys and work alongside you guys and come on your different shows and develop a really strong relationship with a lot of you. And it's just been really great, and I'm still going to be around UCF a ton, so I won't be gone.
You get to be a fanboy, right? So and
not too much. I mean, there's always going to be look.
Yeah.
I've only been off the beat for a month and a half, but I've already been back.
Yeah.
I mean, life happens. Life happens. You just never know what's going to happen, where life's going to take you. So I can't fanboy too much. But obviously, I think everyone involved knows when I'm having a recorder in my hand or a notebook in my hand, I'm going to be down the middle as much as possible. So, but yes, it is exciting to be able to. I did go to this school. I did graduate, and I'm a proud UCF alum and whatnot. So it is exciting to. I've talked to other people who've left the beat and left sports media altogether, watching the games and being able to express yourself. I mean, you go from sitting in the quiet, press box to now being able to react to things as ever you wish. So that's exciting for me. And I'm just really thankful. And it's really been a great journey so far.
How many times have you had to tell people reporters don't write the headlines?
Well, I've had that experience for good and bad. I mean, the fastest way to piss off a UCF fan is say Golden Knight.
Yeah.
And there was one time, I think it was this past season, someone not on our staff, to get to a long story short, we don't write all of the headlines sometimes. We have at the Sentinel people in Chicago that put the pages together, and that's the whole. But somehow, some way, Golden got on there, and my inbox was filled with emails. It's insane. And I'm like, do you guys really think I would write that headline? And it's from an outside perspective, I understand why it looks like I always write all the headlines, but that's actually one of the things I want to improve on, is writing headlines. But I do get asked a lot about headlines, both good and bad. And that's one skill I want to get better at for sure.
Okay. So what are you looking forward to most moving to your new beat?
Yes, it's going to be exciting. I think obviously I want the Magic to do well and make the playoffs this year. I think they have a really special team. Just being around this league, the NBA is just such a special opportunity. I think I was on Brandon Kravitz's show a few weeks ago talking about this chance, and it was never boring covering UCF, but I just got really comfortable. And now that I've been on the Magic beat for about a month and a half, almost 2 months now, I'm starting to get a little bit comfortable, but I'm about as uncomfortable as I have been in a long time. And that was something I wanted to challenge myself with, switching things up and pushing it to the extreme, and working with new coaches, new players and whatnot. And I had a chance to go to Summer League and get the first taste of that, but I'm just really excited for the schedule we just got. I'm excited for the season to start. And just experience new things and grow as a journalist and grow as a reporter, and just to see where it takes me. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, we'll let you start off our shameless plugs portion. So for your coverage of the Orlando Magic, let the audience know how they get that from you.
Yeah, absolutely. You can follow me on Twitter at @TheRealBeede. Of course, OrlandoSentinel.com. We have a special Magic section. I will also plug on over this weekend on Sunday. We have our football preview tab coming out, which I had some of my UCF work, some of the last UCF stories I wrote are in that tab, and we put a lot of hard work into it. So that should be a lot of great reading to do for UCF fans. And then there's also other content in there, but OrlandoSentinel.com. I think Matt Michelle is going to do a great job. I think he's really excited for this opportunity. I mean, it is a Power 5 beat writing opportunity, which doesn't come around too often at the Orlando Sentinel. So it's just a great job. He's going to do a great job on this beat, and I'm excited to see how he does and how UCF does.
Outstanding. Eric?
Well, I will. You can follow me at, of course, Eric Lopez. On all your social medias. I still write on blackandgoldbanneret.com. You'll obviously cover all the UCF sports there. I do a little podcast there, and as well as a podcast now with Around the Kingdom with Trace Trelko and the aforementioned Adam Eaton, who I now pretty much see every day for the rest of our lives. There, he's the executive producer of the show. But prior to this week, I would have called him the Lee Fitting of UCF content, but that's not really a good term to bring up nowadays. Maybe next week, well, I have a feeling the three of us will discuss that topic. But Around the Kingdom, a 30-minute show, fastest UCF show on the Sons of UCF podcast feeds, which Adam can tell you more about. And then I'll be calling some UCF sports on ESPN Plus. Be calling the first homestand of the UCF volleyball season, August 31st. The Jenny Maurer era will begin against FIU at noon prior to the football opener. I'll be calling a couple of men's soccer games, including one in the Sun Belt Conference, which is something to get used to there. And then obviously in the spring, we'll get ready for my 18th season of UCF softball, among other things. So a lot of different hats as usual, but always fun to wear as many hats.
The hardest working man in show business. Brandon.
Yeah, well, I can always be found at UCFsports.com. The Dungeon message board has kind of been my baby for a long time. I'm on Twitter, although I probably don't. Obviously, I'm kind of lackadaisical with other social media. I kind of do the minimal on Twitter. Maybe I'll ramp that up, but UCFsports.com and is where I've always been found for 20 plus years.
And Adam.
I'm responsible for wrangling all the things that are Sons of UCF. That includes a podcast. That's a live show. Eric mentioned Around the Kingdom. You can find all that stuff on our YouTube channel. Just search Sons of UCF. We also do the podcast. All that stuff's on audio. Just your favorite podcast player, type in Sons of UCF. We'll be right there for you. And all the socials, X, Twitter, whatever we're calling that, Facebook, Instagram, you can find us at Sons of UCF.
Yes, and you and Eric will be back on this show next week as we doing our media spotlight show as we go into football season. So there's my shameless plug for the proceedings. Well, guys, you're number 5 of doing this roundtable. Always appreciate it, and great job as always. Thanks for being on.
Always a pleasure to be on.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you, Jeff. Charge on.